Hey everyone. All right, I just want to do a quick video. The reading that I posted was rather long, and so I don't have this scripted, I don't have any slides to go with it. Let's just talk real quick about the reading because a lot of students are kind of caught off guard by the concept of the atomic bombs not being the reason World War II ended in the Pacific. It's how it's always been taught. It's how it was taught when I was in school, elementary through high school, even a little bit into college. But there is some counter evidence that I wanted to bring up. So the article that I have posted for everyone to read, if you haven't taken a look at that, I really encourage you to take a quick look. Was written by Ward Wilson and published in 2013. I distinctly remember when this article came out because I was in China at the time. I was kind of bored at my job, and so I went ahead and just read through the article and was like, whoa, that's a very strong argument. And he has kind of three major points that he focuses on in the article about why the atomic bombs did not, in fact, cause the end of the war, but rather it was the Soviet Union and the Red Army and their aggression moving on Japan. So the first thing is timing. And what he really gets into detail about in the article is that when something so significant happens that it's going to change the trajectory of your national history, leaders do something about it very quickly. He brings up the example of Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. All right, within hours, everyone had been called together to meet, to discuss, to decide a course of action. When North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, President Truman immediately hopped on the plane and was in Washington calling together his advisors within 24 hours. He was in Missouri at the time, basically on vacation at his home. And so leaders respond really quickly when something incredible happens. The bomb was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th. They did not meet. The leadership had the reports. The numbers didn't really change from when the governor initially reported them that afternoon. So they knew of the destruction, and yet they didn't do anything about it. So they just were not, as a leadership team, concerned with the bombing at Hiroshima. When they did meet is when the Soviet Union broke off their kind of non-aggression pact and started invading in Manchuria. That event is what caused them to meet. It took them a couple days to discuss. And essentially, what happened is that on August 9th, they decided to surrender. Something else happened on August 9th, though. That was the second of only two atomic weapons ever used in war, was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. So from the American perspective, we dropped one bomb as a warning. They didn't give up. We dropped the second bomb. They gave up that same day. That's a very convenient narrative, and that's what the author goes into a little bit towards the end of the article. But just keep in mind the facts that the Japanese leadership did not see it that way. The firebombing campaign, which I mentioned in the slides, starting with the firebombing of Tokyo and going all the way through that entire summer of 1945, was far more destructive. Every other day it seemed like there was a new report of a city being 50, 75, 90% destroyed. All right? 90% destruction of a city, if you look at a city of, let's say, Boulder, all the houses are gone, right? Most of the non-houses are gone. So you might have a King Supers remaining. You might have a building at CU remaining. But if you just kind of look at the map of Boulder, 90% destruction, meaning leveled, flattened, not usable, is huge. And that's what was happening on a regular basis to multiple cities that entire summer. So when Hiroshima is 50% destroyed, big whoop, right? I know it's one bomb. It is a new style of weapon, but they were familiar with the concept. They had their own nuclear weapons program. They just hadn't figured it out yet. And kind of one last thing before we go into some of his other points is that the only cities that had not been firebombed, besides Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which had kind of been reserved, if you will, were cities of 30,000 people or less. That's the population of Louisville. Every city bigger than Louisville in all of Japan had already been destroyed. There weren't any targets left. You're going to rebomb the ones you already bombed, they already destroyed half of? All right. So, kind of the last major point that he has, since the scale was the second one, the last one he has is that it's a very convenient story. So last week when I asked you guys to reflect what was in it for Japan, what were the benefits in Germany for this alliance to work out, because they're geographically separated, you need to think about who wins what, all right? Hard power, soft power, who wins if the bombs are in fact the cause of the surrender of the Japanese? Does the United States win? Yes. At the time, we were the only ones that had that technology. We were the only ones that had the nuclear weapons, and we were the only ones that had ever used them. So we win because we kind of have that hard power dynamic of we are the most powerful in the world. So of course, we're very happy if the Japanese say that it was the atomic bombs that caused them to surrender. Japan also wins, right? They had already seen what was going on with the Nuremberg trials in Germany, and if the reason they lost, was because of these nuclear weapons, that almost causes them to become the victims. They're the only nation to ever have been bombed by nuclear weapons. I actually had the privilege of meeting 7 survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They visited St. Olaf College when I was there attending as a student. They are some of the most amazing people you'll ever meet in your life. They're very peaceful. They were not, they did not hate the United States for what we did on those days, and it was an amazing experience. So I don't want to downplay the significance of that, but Japan was able to basically say we lost because of these new weapons, and we were the only ones to ever be targeted with them. So in some ways, they almost became the victims. It also allowed them to do the cultural dynamic of saving face. It wasn't because they did not have a good war. It was not because they were losing, and they'd been losing since Battle of Midway, 1942. They had been constantly on the retreat. They didn't lose because of their failure. They lost because Americans had a bigger weapon, right? So that there's an element of convenience there. So Japan benefits. They get to keep their emperor. They get to become international victims. The United States benefits because they are now the only superpower with nuclear weapons. Yes, Soviet Union follows shortly thereafter. It takes about 4 years, I believe, for them to actually develop the weapons, the bomb. And who loses? Well, actually the Soviet Union loses. Okay, they had just broken off their non-aggression pact with Japan. They had been invading through Manchuria. And they were basically the cause, perhaps the true cause for Japan to surrender. And had they invaded the home islands, they would have been able to tell the international community, we did in 4 days what the United States couldn't do in 4 years, which has caused Japan to surrender, right? They would have had a lot of prestige going into what became the Cold War, because they would have been the best country in the world. So when the bombs were dropped and the Japanese agreed that, yes, we lost because of the bombs, that's taken away from the Soviets. They don't have that prestige. And as a result, the United States is now the #1 power going into what becomes the Cold War. So Soviet Union loses, Japan saves face, become international victims, and the United States becomes #1 in the world with military technology. And that causes the narrative to be as we know it. At least that's what the perspective of the article. I kind of want to see what you guys think through your reflections. It doesn't have to be too long. I'm looking at a page. All right, MLA heading submitted through Google Classroom, and just share with me your thoughts. What changed about your perspective once you've heard this, or is your opinion the same as it was, and why? Why did it change? Why did it stay the same? Okay, look forward to reading those. We have a 4-day weekend coming up, so no school on Friday the 17th, no school on Monday the 20th. Relax, unplug for a little bit. I know some of you guys are going to go straight to the TV, but actually just try to really dial down the screen time because you have 4 days off. I'll see you guys. Have a good day.